There may not be a difference in the needs of the adaptive equipment somebody uses, someone who loses their vision later in life, whether that's in childhood or in adulthood, than somebody who is what we call congenitally blind, but blind at birth, or low vision, has a visual impairment at birth. But what it is, there's a lot of the social or emotional part of it that can be impacted. When you are born with low vision or, totally blind, it is what you know, and it is how you adapt to your world. When you lose your vision, it's a great loss. Vision is probably one of the senses one of the 5 senses that we have that is, really helps us in our day to day. And if you have that and you relied on it, whether it's been for a year or 30 years or 50 years, 60 years even, and then you start to lose that or lose it suddenly, there is an emotional impact that really affects how you are going to access the equipment you need to be productive in your day. So, but the actual equipment itself is going to be the same equipment that a child who's born with low vision or blindness is going to use. It's just your ability to access it if you're emotionally ready, as opposed to a child who's born blind or with low vision. And it's like, the pen that we are introduced, the crayon that we're introduced to, that equipment is just what you're introduced to from the get-go, from the start.
Children with low vision typically need specialized services from a teacher, the blind and visually impaired, or an orientation mobility specialist, and these are offered through special education. They may also need large print materials that are larger than an 18-point font. 18-point font is a typical large print font that's available commercially. If it's larger than that, then a TVI usually needs to make it themselves or hire someone to produce it for them. They may need assistive technology, and that assistive technology is purchased through special education funds. A child on a 504 may not receive TVI or O&M services because a district usually funds the 504 materials and not the special education department. So if they need services from a TVI O&M, then it needs to come from special education. And any child who has low vision needs to be assessed using a functional vision, learning media, expanded core curriculum, orientation mobility assessments to determine their needs. And before you decide whether you put a child on a 504 or IEP, you need to look at those evaluations to determine their eligibility.
So the rule of thumb, even though I'm a big Braille advocate and I wish everybody could learn Braille, but usually if the font needs to be greater than 36 points, I start pushing for Braille. I myself never learned Braille as a child, but when I started training to teach blind children, I learned Braille, and I thought it was such an eye-opener for me, because I thought, like, if I would have learned Braille as a child, I could have been a doctor. No, I'm just kidding. But I felt like I really push Braille. I really do. And parents sometimes tell me, but my child can see. And I said, but we never know. Sometimes some of the diagnoses are very tricky, and sometimes they might lose the vision as they get older, or they might not. So why not get them ready? So my rule of thumb is, if the point size of their print is 36 or greater, or if they're struggling with reading, I start exposing them to Braille.
So I am a orientation mobility specialist. That is my background as well. So an orientation mobility specialist is basically what the title says. You're going to help a child or children through adulthood orient themselves to their surroundings and how to be mobile, or as mobile as that person can be in that environment. So for children, an orientation mobility specialist is going to help expose them to their environment, what are things that you learn through your vision that you might not see or know if you're blind? Like, what is a ceiling? What does that mean? Because I've never, I can't see one up there and I don't know what that means. What's being inside versus outside? I'm on this sidewalk that's concrete and now I'm on this tile flooring and I'm going to stop moving completely because that's a completely new surface for me. So that orientation mobility specialist is really going to help that child understand their surroundings and their environment, expose them to different textures and to different sounds, how to crawl towards a sound of a toy that might be a favorite toy, start to put sounds on toys that don't have sound but are a preferred toy for a child, and how to localize that sound and move toward it. Whether it's just turning your body or your head or crawling or walking towards that so that you can access your surroundings the best way. As children get older and they start street crossing, an orientation mobility specialist will help that child how to street cross if you can't see the traffic, if you can't see a street light, where you are in space. Even bending over, if you're totally blind, can be very disorienting, turning one step to the right or left when you're trying to walk straight, and 10 steps in, now you're in a completely different part of the room, a completely part of the intersection. So we really do help hone in those skills that a child needs to access their environment in the best and safest possible way. We also will introduce a cane, a white cane, if a child does need one. Not every child will use a cane, but the ones that do need a cane, we will introduce that, teach them how to use it to protect themselves the best way, moving it in a left-right arc, how to use it for street crossing and just to navigate your environment. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that an orientation mobility specialist can do to just really help people access to their environment and to be most familiar with. So even for a child here, when they come into a classroom, we're going to take the time to show them the classroom, move them around it. This is where the toy shelf is. This is where the art shelf is. This is where the block area is. This is circle time, so that the child can get up and start to move freely and more independently throughout the classroom. You are your child's first teacher. You know your child the best. You have concerns, you have questions. Advocate for your child. Get the supports that you need. Come to the Blind Children's Center. We are happy to help you. And just really get to know and reach out to those who can help you access what is available. There is a lot available. Unfortunately, sometimes we do get parents whose children are 4 or 5 years old, and we wish we could have gotten to them when they were first born to really help support the family as a whole, as well as the child and their individual needs. But either they just didn't know where to go or who to reach out to. But again, and with some diagnoses, there could be, if it's cataracts and things like that, take them to their doctor's appointments, make sure that they're getting the medical services they need as well.
In a perfect world, in my time here, we have seen a handful of parents that have walked out of Children's Hospital and to our front door.
Which is wonderful.
Because they already had the diagnosis and they were able to process really quick and get over it. And sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Sometimes it takes up to a year before they process that, talk to the family, and then came here. So, time is of an essence,
Yes. I think the youngest child we ever served here is like 3 days old. Like she said, literally came out of the hospital, had a visual diagnosis, came over to our center. But again, like I said, sometimes they're, we serve children up to 5 years old, and sometimes they're right on that edge, and we're really trying to help them access as much as they can and, before they're ready to move on to elementary school.